So the astrology of the week of 19 July 2021 through 25 July 2021 is potent, it's fierce, and it brings this kickoff in a way to the Aquarian second half of 2020, where we'll be returning to themes, heavy Aquarian themes, and the themes of the first half of 2021. We have two planets changing signs as well. We've got the Sun entering Leo, Venus entering Virgo, and then this full moon in Aquarius. So let's jump into these charts. Let's jump into the week. And I want to start always with my videos. What you'll get here is an examination of the planetary aspects, the sign changes, the stations. That's the first thing I'm going to discuss. The second thing will be the moon and the movements of the moon through the signs this week. We can look at the condition of the moon as it's changing, when the most important things for ancient astrologers and for really all astrologers is the moon and its movements. And then I'll take you into a chronological examination of a few of the charts that I'm looking at this week. You can kind of come into my world and how I look at the astrological shifting sands, as it were. And then we'll do a tarot cartomancy reading at the end of the video, just to add some more flavor to what we might want to expect for this week. So I'm glad you're here. This is S.J. Anderson, astrologer, writer, tarologist, cartomancer. You can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on Instagram. But let's dive in here to the charts. And actually, I'm thinking about just a little bit of an introduction here. What else, is there anything else I need to talk about? Not really. I mean, that's the big story for me, is this Aquarian moment we're about to have. And a lot of astrologers have been talking about Jupiter coming back into Aquarius as a return to the Aquarian energy of the first half of the year, and I think they're right. Remember, Jupiter was in Aquarius December 2020, May 2021. So we had a very fast Jupiter moving through Aquarius and doing a lot. I found that transit to be quite dynamic, quite energizing in the sector of my chart that happened in. But Jupiter and Saturn together are the big heavy hitters of astrology, the great planets, according to the ancient tradition. So when they join, they can revolutionize and change and invert and subvert and really do a job on our Aquarian, part of our reality and part of our charts. So yes, Jupiter coming back. Jupiter has stopped. It's stationed retrograde, and now it's going to enter Aquarius at the end of July. So that's a very big part of this second half of the year, the Aquarian return. But there's some other things happening this week and this next month that underscore that even further, and that is that we have two full moons in Aquarius this summer. And it's quite rare. I think every 18 months, every so often. So it's not that rare, but you'll have three syzygies on the same axis. And I think the last time was in Cancer in 2019 or 2020. I think it was 2019. But still, it's about a year or two where you would have three syzygies in the same season on the same axis. And we get that this summer. Two full moons in Aquarius, one new moon in Leo. And so it's this extra dose of a syzygies on this axis with two in Aquarius. And the way I examine new moons and full moons, what I call syzygies, are that they are punctuation points, and they're the beats of our reality, the drum beats of our reality. So we get two drum beats. You think about it in a club, you're listening to those beats of that music, and then that DJ shifts the music. That's what syzygies do. It's like a musical shift. And we're going to get two of these Aquarian beats as we're kind of dancing through this summer. And so it underscores even more that this Aquarian energetic is returning, and it's here this summer, and we're getting a burst of it this summer while Jupiter comes back into Aquarius, and then we'll be dealing with that the rest of the year to kind of put the finishing touches on these Aquarian parts of the chart. So that's kind of my introduction here. not necessarily to the week, but just kind of some important things that I think are relevant to the current astrological energy. Backdrops, foredrops, front drops, backgrounds, foregrounds. Okay, so let's dive in here. These are the aspects of the week and the sign changes. Big change is that Venus is going to lose some dignity here, and it's going to come in from Leo, where it is what we call peregrine. There was a lot of discussion on Twitter this week about peregrine planets. I think that's more of a medieval concept, maybe. I mean, for me, the way I like to analyze planets is it's just a filtering. So Venus was filtering through the Sun when it was in Leo, and of course it was throttled by Mars and Saturn, with a conjunction to Mars and an opposition to Saturn. There was that moment there where Venus had some strength in its Egyptian terms, but that was short-lived. And Venus had this rough time. I mean, Venus is what we call night sect sign. Think about pleasure. It happens at night often. It's in the comfort of the home, with people we love, maybe with, we're not wearing the professional clothes and the worldly outfits. We come back and we can kind of disrobe a little bit and be with the people we love, and Venus is very much a kind of a settling into and relaxing energy. There is a side to Venus that comes from the most ancient Babylonian tradition of the war goddess, but in our Hellenistic astrological tradition, that's not focused on as much. I think the war Venus can come when we think about Venus and Libra and Saturn, that there's a kind of war component to the Libra energetic where we're kind of fighting to make new structures and new rules. But remember, Venus rules Taurus, is the other sign that Venus rules, and that's this night sect earth sign. So this passive, earthy pleasure. Passive just in the sense that we maybe let pleasure happen to us. You watch a film, don't be the guy in the theater that's jabbering in the movie. That's one of my biggest pet peeves, but we sit back and let the film kind of envelop us. That's Venus in Taurus, or Venus being a ruler of the night sect. Or if we're in a concert, let's say you go to watch a play, you're not going to be jabbering at a play, I know that. I wish people had the same etiquette in movie theaters that they do when they watch a play, because with a play you're live with the actor, you're giving them your full attention. Or in a concert, let's say you're in a very intimate concert where someone's playing classical guitar and you're on the street, you're not going to be interrupting that. So that's what I mean by the passivity of Venus's pleasure. And so when we think about Venus filtering through the sun in Leo, that's a whole different dynamic. I mean, that's a hot, energized dynamic. That's not as good for enjoying pleasures. I mean, look at the weather. It's hot as hell out there. That's not very pleasurable. So Venus had to filter through the sun, right? So when Venus falls now into Mercury, Mercury's ruled Virgo. Virgo ruled by Mercury. Okay, so we're now filtering through Mercury, and this is where we're exploring when we try to analyze why Venus might have had some trouble in Leo, and now Venus gets maybe even more trouble here in Virgo. And I have here hyper focus on pleasure. It's not the most useful way to enjoy pleasure. So if we're going back to this concert analogy, you've got the classical guitar going, and if all I'm doing while I'm taking that in is analyzing it, thinking about my problems, thinking about the problems of the guitar, where the guitar was made, oh, what's that finger pattern? The Mercury style analysis does not allow for that reception of the pleasure. And that's the core tension of Venus here in Virgo, is how do we let pleasure exist without trying to be too persnickety when we are engaged in pleasurable things. Or even beauty. It's like, sometimes I'm not very, I don't have makeup on, or I'm not really preparing. When I record, this isn't some intense studio with like makeup people getting me all ready. I try to make sure I look okay, all right? Go into the mirror a little bit before I record. But if I were to focus on every little hair, every little blemish, it would ruin my ability to be relaxed and just enjoy this moment of this recording, And so that hyper focus on the detail can sometimes invalidate something that's otherwise profound and beautiful. So like the off-key singer, enjoying the Bob Dylan songs. I love Bob Dylan, by the way, one of my favorite musical artists. And his voice it's unique. And if we were to kind of put it through maybe the analysis, there's things you might not like about it, but there's a soul and a kind of a rootedness there that if we can allow that to take us, we will be lifted up to very high places, letting go of the over-analysis and the anxieties about the pleasure. So that's the big thing that happens this week. This is going to happen on the 22nd here, which would be, so I'm doing these hand counts now because I want to make sure I get it right. Monday 19, 20 Tuesday, 21 Wednesday. So this is Thursday in Central Europe. We'll get that shift of Venus into Virgo very early in the morning, about 3 a.m. Then what happens immediately upon Venus's entry to Virgo, you get Venus being charged up by an opposition to Jupiter. I'm going to talk about that transit later. I really like that energy. That happens later in the day on Thursday. And then on Thursday also, you get the Sun coming into Leo shortly after that. So Thursday's a big energetic shift. And I was talking to a friend today, an astrological colleague of mine, and it was a whole nother conversation about why whole sign houses are important, which is a house system in astrology. If you aren't an astrologer or aren't even an astrology enthusiast, you can, and you want to be, that's something you can research. But the importance of planetary ingresses and how they're felt in the collective. Sometimes there is stark shifts of energy. The last one that comes to mind for me was Mercury coming out of Gemini into Cancer. I mean, immediately I was seeing and feeling really this very relaxed, home and earthy kind of, it's a water sign, but the moon rules Cancer. I mean earthy here, not in the elemental reference, but just this idea of the home being kind of where we root. And I felt it, and it was a wonderful shift. Mercury had been in Gemini going retrograde for 2 months, something like that, over 2 months. So watch this Thursday. I think Friday will feel very different than Wednesday, for example. Friday is going to bring a whole different set of energies, and it's all happening there within 14 hours on Thursday, the 22nd of July. So this Leo season emerges, the Sun will bring its power. So the Sun is the domicile ruler of the sign, the Leo, the fixed fire sign. The Sun is fire. I mean, where I am, it's been very hot, and I've been going out midday, and it's just the sun right on me, and you feel the Sun's fire. In the Vedic tradition, they say the Sun is a malefic planet. I think because it can burn so much, and it can really cause pain when it burns. But the Sun gets power now in terms of its position in the zodiac here in Leo. The great thing about it is that we've had Saturn in Aquarius, Saturn ruling Aquarius, the cold, restrictive energies of Saturn. Mars and Venus have been fending off Saturn and fighting Saturn with this opposition in the recent past. Now the Sun, Venus leaves, and Mars gets the Sun as its partner in crime, so to speak, to kind of fight this very authoritarian Saturn, this cold, restrictive Saturn. And so I'm thinking that this week can be where the light gets shined on the Aquarius-Leo axis and the restrictions we've been dealing with, whether personally or collectively. These harsh limitations get that light shined on their nature. And so hopefully we can emerge from this Leo season with a kind of compromise or a better understanding of just how that Saturn in Aquarius wants to impose restriction, and maybe it's a negotiation, right? Saturn is going to say, I want this. The Sun is going to say, I want this. They're going to go at that negotiation, and hopefully the agreement reached will be more reasonable than before the Sun entered Leo. So, and maybe it's not a kind of negotiation that's calm. These negotiations can get fiery, hot, and fierce. That term I used in the introduction. We'll talk more about that here in a second. So let's go to the moon's transits. The moon here starts the week again in a fixed sign T-square with Mars and Saturn and Uranus. Ends the week in a fixed sign T-square with Mars, Saturn, and Uranus. We have again these weekend pressures, and this has been a feature of the whole 6 weeks of Mars's transit in Leo, which ends next week, of this really active dynamic time. And I wrote down here world pressures, protests, disasters. The big story in Europe right now is a natural disaster. It's like a mudslide or a mud flood there in Germany. I saw pictures of it. I mean, there was like a massive building that was about to fall into this mud pit. That's super intense, and it's the kind of thing you might think of with Uranus and Taurus, surprises or shocks to the land, but triggered again by Saturn and Mars, the two malefics, in the fixed axis, with the moon there hitting every 6-7 days. The moon comes in and hits and activates this T-square. So this week has been massive protests all over the world. I'm not even going to list the countries. I don't want to talk about that in too much detail, but just punch it up, protest, type it into Twitter. You can see it, see the images. They're striking, people battling cops, people out in the streets to the government buildings of their location, demanding things or pushing back, against the Saturn and Aquarius. That's Mars, protest. Been fighting Saturn and Aquarius. Now again, the Sun joins this week, and that can be a very powerful force in Leo. So I'm thinking some of those protests may expand, grow, clarify their aims, and they'll have a lot more astrological support this week. But remember, watch for when the moon triggers, because that is the lunar trigger of the T-square. We get that this week. We start the week with it. And on Monday, late in the afternoon at 11 p.m. here in Central Europe, we lose it. So it's only that Monday that we have this fixed T-square activated by the moon. Then we enter this early week Sagittarius transit. It's a real bright spot. It's the last moon in Sagittarius with Jupiter in Pisces until the end of the year. I think very late in December, the moon comes into Sagittarius just after Jupiter will go into Pisces for good. So we'll get a return to this in 2021, this energy, but this is the last one we have. And then this T-square reemerges on Saturday, 2 a.m. where I am, so Friday in North America. And we have all weekend with Saturn moon. Saturn will then take over and rule the moon. Actually on Thursday when the moon comes into Capricorn, but that Aquarius moon is when the T-square gets reactivated on Saturday. So we have Saturday and Sunday all day with this activated Aquarius T-square that I think this coming weekend this week will be maybe explosive for some of these world events. I think that is the time that I'm looking for the explosion. We're going to talk all about the full moon chart because that will be a full moon in this talk. So but the note I have here, the moon and Saturn are a really mixed energy. It's a really mixed bag. They're not the best mix. The moon is homey, earthy, I was saying, and wants to be protected and with people we love and our bodies and nurturing. Saturn is all about harsh conditions, cool conditions, restriction, things you don't want in a home. So now, unless you're talking about the long-term stable structures that sometimes Saturn can bring, but those are earned often through challenge and difficulty. But we get this Saturn moon. So I think this week I was thinking about this week earlier. I think this is a pretty big week for the year. It's a pivot back into the Aquarian moment. And this pivot has a lot of kind of climactic energy here. As we pivot back. So I'm looking at this as to be a key week, actually, a very key week for the astrology. One of those weeks that's sort of subtle in a way. It's not an eclipse. It's not in the ingress of Jupiter and Saturn. It doesn't have really explosive planetary aspects, but it's key in that it is a syzygy that marks a shift and a big one. So let's go now to the weekly charts I want to examine here, starting off on Tuesday, very early in the morning. This is the chart of the moon ingressing into Sagittarius. It immediately applies upon its ingress to Jupiter and Pisces. You can see it in the chart here with that big red line. The moon will be ruled by Jupiter, strong still in its domicile of Pisces, the planet of truth, abundance, justice, wisdom, hope, in its water sign, domicile. That moon now will be received by and applying to that very strong Jupiter for the last time until December. And I love this because it's again setting us up here as we shift back into the heavy Aquarian focus this week with the full moon later in the week and then with Jupiter's coming back into Aquarius next week, it's this kind of final moment here midweek where maybe we can get some of the big ideas in order. You know, what has Jupiter in Pisces been for you? You know, what are the good things it's brought to you? I know I have a list. I know I have some of these subtle changes that it's like, yeah, this is exactly what Jupiter in Pisces brought to me. The good stuff, the healing, the love, the hope, the freedom. And that's part of my chart where it's operating. You know, and so it's time now to, I think, with astrology, remember, it's always cycles, and then first it's triggered here, and then it gets triggered later. So it's building blocks of change in our reality. And this is just that final moment of this season of the building block of very strong Jupiter, with this moon here waxing, but applying to its ruler. So there's some finishing touches here. I think we can think about, all right, I'm going to wrap up this first opening salvo of Jupiter and Pisces. It's being wrapped up now, but we can kind of put a bow on it and then set it back on the shelf. Or actually, maybe even a better analogy, put it on a pendant and wear it as we then go back into battle with the Aquarian energy for the rest of the year, or go back into filtering through that Aquarian energy. The battle metaphors, I know I don't want to be using those too much. People don't seem to like the battle metaphor, but I like it. I just think life, from the moment you're born, you're bursting out of that womb, you're coming out, and you're into this world, and you're sort of doing the dance of life, which can sometimes feel like there's obstacles that we're overcoming. So, okay, let me come back to here, getting our big ideas in order, taking what we can take from this 3 months of Jupiter and Pisces, setting us up here for the Aquarius heavy second half of the year. The South Node with the Moon, not the best energy for the Moon either. It's a draining energy. However, I do think that it does underscore this spiritual component of Jupiter. Jupiter rules priests and teachers and wisdom traditions. This is the realm of Jupiter. The South Node is a little bit more of a rougher side to that. It can be kind of the disillusionment of the material realm that comes from pain and suffering. Then we're forced to go inward. So with the South Node here, though, I like it. There's a real spiritual tone here, and it's this idea of getting ideals in order to face the fall. I think we can sort of spiritualize here midweek. Go inward, feel the pain and suffering, feel maybe the challenges that may be emerging as we have to face Aquarius again, and kind of get our spiritual core right. Maybe this transit, I think, is perfect for that. And then say, all right, I'm ready to go in. The Christian tradition, I grew up in the Christian tradition, there's the idea of the armor of God. I don't remember these verses. I just remember from my training as a young man, as a young boy, really, we would talk about the armor of God, and I like the idea of these kind of spiritual tools that we can equip ourselves with as we go in to face life. And for me, meditation, prayer, that's what the South Node can be about. It's really that kind of the desperate prayer. Those are the best prayers anyway, aren't they? I'm on my knees, universe. I love you, help me. I really need your help. Those seems to be the most charged prayers. But we're talking about, that's a tool that we can equip ourselves with. Any kind of other disciplines of the meditation practices, those are disciplined, regular practices we can equip ourselves with. Any kind of the accoutrements of the spirit. I know people love their altars or their talisman or their imageries that they put on altars and things. These are all spiritual tools. Spiritual community. What kind of community do you have that you can maybe connect with here to set yourself up? Having people you can check in with as needed. I've got a list here. I've got folks that sometimes I haven't talked to them in months and months. I can just press a button. We're on the call, and I can open my heart, and they give me that spiritual love. Those are all the kind of spiritual toolkits that we can have as we prepare to return to Aquarius for the fall. So that's what I love this transit for. I think it's a great transit for it. It'll be, let me go back to this slide. It is late Monday here in Central Europe at 11 p.m. and this Sagittarius moon lasts until Thursday at 12:30 a.m. So basically we're looking at Tuesday and Wednesday. We get this energy to maybe do some spiritual work, get our spiritual toolkits kind of organized and revitalized, just getting in touch with them. So I love that transit. Really excited about it. Now, the South Node will be out of Sagittarius next year. And I think these Sagittarius moons next year with Jupiter in Pisces without the South Node, those are going to be some maybe more immediately felt positive transits. This one does kind of take out some of the phantom that often is the material, right? That's not a chair, it's just molecules, or it's the dark inner spiritual energy. That's dark energy is what I meant to say there, that in physics that like 90% of reality is dark energy. I think that's something to do with the spirit, the pneuma. But this is, so just I'm mentioning here that later we will get Sagittarius moons next year in that first 5 months that are quite different than this one. That South Node is never to be underestimated. It's extremely powerful. So, okay, let's go to the next transit I want to look at. Here we now are here we now are on Thursday, the big day this week maybe, of 2 big days, Thursday and then Saturday. And we've got, let me see here. We've got, sorry, I'm usually just can constantly talk. Let me just come back here. Yes, so now we're here on Thursday, 2:44 p.m. This is that Venus-Jupiter opposition. Lovely transit to greet Venus entering Virgo and the struggles that Venus can have in Virgo. So what I have here is deep love, this sort of transcendent style love. We were just talking about Jupiter's role as the spiritual planet in a way, of teachers and of priestly energy, and kind of the things, the ideas that can change and shift our mentalities, bring us hope and joy, revitalize us, revitalize our commitments, to ourselves and to the world and to our spiritual path. It's this kind of deeper sort of transcendent side of hope that Jupiter is. And I think that with here, what I'm looking at is that Jupiter can send help here to Venus as Venus struggles maybe with more ephemeral pleasures and the struggle of how to integrate those. Jupiter can kick Venus into some higher level, thought processes here. So, maybe there's some resistance to feeling good, or mental resistance to pleasure that might be triggered up upon Venus's ingress. This moment here, this opposition to Jupiter and Pisces, can kick things into a more agapic style thinking. Agapic love, the great love for everything and everybody. Heart-centered agapic love. You find this in the Sufi tradition, is very much about the heart and expanding the heart. The Buddhist traditions of loving kindness meditation, where you can radiate from the heart center love for all things. That itself is pleasurable, but it's not that immediate hit of dopamine. Sometimes Venus can be about the more immediate types of feel-good energy. And so when it has this jolt from Jupiter, I think it allows us to sort of let go of those tensions of the struggles in that immediate moment and kick into, like I said, these agapic considerations. The thing I love also about this chart, Venus leaves Leo, but it leaves that rough fixed sign T-square with Mars, Saturn, and then Uranus and Taurus. Venus basically stops being throttled by the malefic planets right upon its entry into Virgo, and then it gets that love from Jupiter to sort of encase it and heal it. You think about going back to childbirth as an analogy. What do you do when a baby comes into the world? They go right in. I guess they can snip the umbilical cord pretty quickly, but they wrap it up, and then they give it to the mother or the father or the parent, and they wrap it up. So this Jupiter's kind of the encasement. Venus is coming out of that really difficult period with Mars and Saturn, and now we can maybe encase it here with Jupiter, swaddle that babe, and then give it some of that love. Virgo is ruled by Venus and the Moon from the triplicity rulership scheme, and so there is something here about giving that comfort to the babe, the newborn. I think that fits with the Earth sign energetic via the triplicity rulership scheme. So I think it's a great opportunity in these early days of Venus and Virgo being so close to Jupiter via aspect and orb, that we can sort of enjoy Venus being separated from the malefic energy. Now that ends next week. But maybe there's something here with Venus and Virgo without Mars that we can enjoy before Mars comes in next week. So that's here on the 22nd of July, about 2:44 p.m. where I am. The next transit I want to look at is the 24th of July. This comes in Saturday, 4:30 a.m. This is the full moon in Aquarius. The big syzygy drumbeat to check our reality and create this 2-week energy. Remember, we've been basking in 2 weeks of that amazing new moon in Cancer that had such good energy with the water trine from Jupiter. We leave that now. We get a new spin on the DJ table. A new record's going to be put on, and it's this harsh Aquarian, Saturnian, malefic full moon. And it's the first, like I said, of 2 Aquarius full moons this summer. Just look at the chart. I mean, the moon is co-present with Saturn, so it's ruler Saturn. It's almost like we have to abandon home, nurture, and the body and comfort of the body, and basically say, all right, I'm going into a very cold and kind of restrictive, disciplined, moment here. I think about boot camps. You leave that where I've been on my yoga teacher in Belarus, living on a farm, living in a tent, very harsh, very disciplined schedules. We woke up at 5:50 or so every day, went to bed at 10, and everything was planned out. I mean, very intense, disciplined yogic practice. That's when I had to let go of my moon, and let go of my lunar comforts and just kind of give the moon over to Saturn. This is actually where they can kind of partner in a way. The moon is the ruler of foresight, according to Vedic Phalans, and the moon can be very spiritual and very, I was going to say divination oriented. Divinatory, I think, was the word that was trying to come out. I didn't want to say it wrong. I didn't want to mispronounce it. But sometimes the coldness of Saturn, which is also a planet of divination and connection to the divine, when they can meet, it's almost like the moon can sacrifice the more immediate pleasures and give itself to Saturn to connect in this kind of spiritual looping of divination. And the spiritual, side sometimes requires austerity. I mean, you want to have openings like the kind you have on a silent meditation retreat, for example. I remember the one I did. I've done several, but I did one back in early aughts. It was a 10-day retreat in Northern California, and it was about 4 days in of every day sitting. No talking, vow of silence, heavy walking, sitting meditation, and Tai Chi. But we were doing Tai Chi with this cool teacher. And I just remember about 4 days in, boom, I'm doing Tai Chi, and boom, I'm hallucinating. And not a psychotic way, but just in a way where I was tapping into some of the psychedelic practices I had been involved in earlier in my youth. And so it was this very spiritual moment where I was kind of keyed into the psychedelic realm through this rigor and discipline of spiritual practice. This is what Moon Saturn can actually be, especially in Aquarius, because in Capricorn, the moon is opposite Cancer. It's not as comfortable there. But when you get into Aquarius, it can be kind of these idea sets and these maybe openings that can be more mental and more perceptive that the moon Saturn combination could bring. And then the foresight that comes in, right? So, which I think of as predictive or divinatory, the word foresight, seeing what's going to be. But this is kind of the most positive delineation about this full moon. Maybe through this struggle and through this tension between Mars and Saturn, there would be breakthroughs of foresight, or able to kind of re-perceive things in a way that can be auspicious. But check out the chart. So we've got the moon co-present with Saturn, its ruler. The term's ruler is averse to the moon, Cancer. I'm not going to talk much about Mercury and Cancer here. Opposite Mars and Leo. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is the only of the 2 full moons in Aquarius this summer. Only one has Saturn and Mars in joining the axis here, and this sign-based opposition. I almost feel like we did have the exact orb of Saturn and Mars making that opposition, was it 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? I almost feel like this is more intense for that than the exact orb, because it's a syzygy, it's a full moon. And so it automatically massively ups the intensity. And then you still have the mixing of energies that happens anytime a planet is in a sign and co-present with other planets. And by the way, this is how ancient astrologers read charts. I mean, they weren't focused on, well, this orb is now separating, so it doesn't apply. No, It's a sign-based aspect model because of the mixing of energies that takes place when two planets are in a sign. This Mars is almost more powerful now. It's in its own Egyptian terms in this chart, so it has gained dignity. It did not have that dignity earlier in its transit. Now, these are the only degrees, these last, 6 degrees, 5-6 degrees of Leo, where the Mars gets very strong and can do martial things well. Saturn's been winning this whole time. Now Mars has some tools to play. And not only that, it is co-present with the domicile ruler. The Sun has great power here. So we've got two of the two fiery planets of our planetary scheme in a dignity in the fixed fire sign have now come to wage their agenda, and exert their agenda onto that Saturn in Aquarius and that Saturnian coldness and the rule sets and the structures and the limitations. And it's at a time where the moon is here with Saturn. So it's quite, I think it's the most intense of the whole of the Saturn-Mars opposition transit. For me, it is. You've got the lights of the sky, the moon and the sun, joining the two malefic planets here, and they all have dignity in a way, other than the moon doesn't. But they can now finally kind of get unleashed on each other. So this is very, very climactic, intense energy. I wanted to say, let me just go to the next slide here. I talked about Mars having term dignity and the Sun being in its domicile. Saturn is strong with the moon. We talked about that. But the people coming into walls, this is the phrase I wanted to bring up here. Now, the moon in mundane astrological tradition, and really in just the whole of the astrological tradition, is the masses and groups of people. So this transit, as the moon is full here, coming to be with Saturn, does feel like the moment that the people meet the wall. But they have this massive firepower opposing the wall as well, of the Sun, which can be the consciousness of the identity, really the selfhood. A lot of these protests and marches have been so-called freedom-oriented. I put that in quotes because we can debate all of their meanings and really try to unpack each place where these protests are happening have their own context. Each place has its own context by which these words get mentioned or thrown around, and it's kind of, without saying, I'm not going deep into each of those situations here and trying to extract a principle like so-called freedom, or just saying the ability for individuals to actualize their will. That might be the Sun in Leo, with Mars here, over powerfully defending their ability to actualize what they feel like is their will and their right against the government and the old structures of the authorities. And I know not every protest is about the same thing. There's all kinds of different issues going on right now, but that's kind of fundamental in protest. If we just think about what a protest is, it's people saying, no, you're wrong, to authorities. And that's very much encased here. I mean, we could have a Moon-Saturn transit, just an average Moon-Saturn transit in Aquarius without the moon or without Mars there. It's completely different. With the Sun, without the Sun in Leo and without Mars there, it's completely different. These two planets being here, it brings fire against those restrictions and limits. The firepower of the Sun and Mars, both dignified. I think, I don't know what's going to happen this coming weekend, but I'm guessing it's about protests because they're already extant. But anything could happen here. I'm going to be watching closely. So anyhow, this is my read of that syzygy chart. Let me come in, the full moon in Aquarius syzygy chart. Let me come in here to the one part of the fixed star conjunction that's so interesting here, and why I think this is even more a re-triggering for us back into the first part of the year, December, January, because this full moon is close to conjoin these fixed stars, Sham and Tarazid. Okay, very, very close to Sham and Tarazid. And now Altair is within a degree as well. But the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius on the winter solstice in 2020, the very rare meeting every 20 years of those two great planets, happened right here, conjoined Sham and Tarazid. I have a video in my feed, Jupiter, Saturn, and Aquarius ushers in a new Aquarian age, something like that. an Aquarian age, not the age of Aquarius, though that's a whole debate. I don't want to get into that now. We're in the age of Aquarius, in my view. It happened in about 1904. Stephen Forrest agrees with me on that. We have whole different rationales, but we come to that same moment. It really helped me realize my thinking, I think, is supported by other awesome astrologers. So I think we're in the age of Aquarius, but even within the great age of Aquarius, this is another age, a little age of Aquarius that has been launched with this 20-year cycle of Jupiter and Saturn conjoining in Aquarius. So in that video, I break down the symbolism of these constellations. This is a eagle called Aquila. Okay, this is the eagle that was eating out Prometheus's liver when Prometheus was punished for stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity. This bow here, this is where Sham is on this arrow. That's the arrow of Hercules that kills Aquila and frees Prometheus. So thematically, and I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but it's in that video if you want to go into a deeper breakdown. The theme that gets triggered is twofold. One is a theme of timing. We're now triggering the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction. So we're triggering this great turning of the age that Jupiter and Saturn conjunction ushered in. We know what that's been, right? It's been the crisis, the global crisis we're in, and all the changes in our reality that crisis ushered in, some good, some bad. But then two, it triggers the themes, the thematic concepts that are encased in these constellations. Technology, the power of technology to enslave, the power of technology to free. And that's what the Prometheus story is about. The gods didn't want fire to come to the humans. They knew it could free humans. Prometheus was punished and trapped as a result of the choice to seek that freedom, to give and spread technology. So there's very much themes related to our present age and our current moment. I mean, what are these protests about? Just think about it. People are angry about the changes, and they don't want certain changes coming in, certain technological shifts to come in. Not all of the protests are about that, but many are. So we're triggering here Saturday morning, and then all weekend we have the Aquarius moon. I think we're going to see some really interesting turns in this story and in this narrative that really for the whole 20-year cycle, because this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is a root chart. It's a root chart for 20 years. We really like to use the Aries ingress 2020 as the main root chart, but we can also use the exact conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and we're triggering that now. That degree is being triggered. So I think events are going to happen this week that will move along this greater story, this greater 20-year mini Aquarian age that we've entered. And this is the moment for those events to be brought along and accelerated. Okay, so that's the weekly astrology. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you're here. Let's shift over now and let's pull the tarot cards and let's see what the tarot wants to tell us about the week. What kind of new information we can get from the cards. I'm going to get the first card. Okay, the first card is, let's see here. This is interesting. Let me just check it. Okay. The first card is, okay, a heart harmony. This is the sun in Scorpio, that middle decan of Scorpio, that the sun is ruled by the sun. It's so interesting to see this because this week the sun and Mars are co-present. The sun is ruled by Mars in the middle decan of Scorpio. There's something here about the sun and Mars and their relationship to be useful to work together. I've already talked about how they're both fire signs. Mars is really explosive fire. The sun is the constant burn. And so I think when we can figure out how to be less combustive and more deliberate and more strategic with how we burn things, it actually works much, much better. I've got an electric stove now, but I've had gas stoves in my recent past, and you turn it up too much or too little, it goes out. Too much, it becomes unwieldy. Sometimes these gas stoves can really, the one I had when I was in China was just massive. I mean, it was like a really high flame and I had to turn that down to be functional. But I guess the metaphor could be with just heating or cooking. You cook the eggs, you want that medium heat. you don't want to burn them. You don't want it too low, they don't cook. So there's something here about making sure the consistent heat is fixed in a proper encasement. Remember, Scorpio is a fixed sign, Leo is a fixed sign. So there's a fixedness and a structure to the fire that this card, I think, is implying here. And, you know, so I'm going to go with that with the reading. This is in the recent past. It makes me also think about the water sign Cancer. Mars just came out of Cancer and now is in Leo. And the emotions and the component of the emotions when we're dealing with things that are triggering, things that are intense, things that make us angry, things that engender passion. You know, how can we modulate the emotional states as a way to be more effective? You know, sometimes that means I'm just emotional wreck. I'm going in for till tomorrow or till, well, I'm not an emotional wreck. And it's acknowledging the fact that the emotions can't be controlled in a certain time. Other times it is pausing and breathing and feeling emotional reactions and noting them and then integrating them. Sometimes that can happen in a 20-second period of this kind of triggering and then integration. But it's a way to kind of contain and not let those emotions overrun or overrule. So that might be what I would just be thinking about. What's triggering you right now, and how can you kind of contain it or encase it so that you can not deny it, but feel it and integrate it and keep on the focus, the eye on that prize. Remember, the sun is the consistent energy, consistent awareness of the goals that you have in your life. Emotional triggering can be integrated and support those goals and support that consistency. So that's what I'm going to say about this card. Let me get that second card from the God deck, the Tarot of Marseille. Let's see what comes up here to add to the symbols. Okay, we've got, I believe this is the Hierophant. Let me just check here. Let me make sure, but I believe this may be the Hierophant. Yes, oh no, it's the Emperor. Perfect. Wow, wow. Okay, this is even better. This is even better. Again, Sun, Mars energy. This card, the Emperor, corresponds to Aries. What is the fire sign Aries? It's a cardinal fire sign. The Sun exalts in Aries and Mars rules Aries. Now we have the Sun and Mars together in Leo this week, both dignified, Mars in its own terms, the Sun in its domicile. So this is actually really powerful. And I think it jibes just quite well with what I was just talking about. You know, the Emperor energy is one about using your force, action, exertion, power, fire, and mastering something to where you kind of can rise up in a position of power, you know, and good power. We're not talking about bad power. We're talking about the power that allows you to do good things for others, that allows you to protect yourself and others. You know, eminence in a field, using the force of passion and action. And so I see this here and I'm thinking right away, it tells me this full moon and really the period of Mars and Saturn, or Mars and the Sun co-present in Leo. I've been thinking about it now for about a month, about 6 weeks since I keyed into exactly this week-long period that will have Mars and the Sun together. I think it's a great time here to feel your power, come into your power, you know, overcome your limitations. That's the Saturn. Use the limitations to help fuel you, but really staying consistent. The Sun is the solar consciousness, that consistent awareness of where you're going and then executing that day to day with the Mars, very powerful in these terms of Leo, these degrees of Leo. Keeping the eye on the prize. I'm just going to stick with that phrase as a way to delineate that. We've got real opportunities this week. So stay strong, stay active, keep going, and have a wonderful week ahead. That's the weekly tarot and the weekly astrology. I'm S.J. Anderson. Thank you very much for being here. As always, you can go to my website, sjanderson144.com/readings, or just click here to schedule a reading right on the top. Love to do tarot and astrology readings. You can book them or schedule them there. I'm on Patreon now. You can support me there. I would much appreciate that. It helps the production of these videos. And have a lovely, lovely, wonderful week ahead. I'll talk to you very, very soon.